I'd like to introduce you to Rob Rogers. Rob is an award-winning editorial cartoonist for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, entertaining Pittsburgh since 19. Rob. Please excuse me. My brain is a little fried today. I'm sorry. Since 1984, and he is syndicated by several prestigious newspapers and magazines. Please check out his bio, if you haven't already, in our wonderful program to get more information on him. And just Google his name and you'll see many things come up. He has his own Facebook page. If you join that, you can get daily postings sent to you. His drawings are fabulous and writings are brilliant. And I hope you find him as enjoyable and witty as I did when I first met Rob. So thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Rob.
When she first met me back in the 1800s, thank you very much, and thank you to the association for having me here today. You know, I'm a big fan of art education, and as you may know, being an art student myself, growing up and then going to college for art, and I got a master's in painting at CMU. So even though I've done cartooning my whole life, but art in any form is very important, and we need to keep it in our schools. So thank you for championing that in what you do. Is there a possibility to get the lights down so that this is easier to see? Okay. So I'm gonna start out by just talking a little bit about how I got started. So as I said, I drew a lot of cartoons as a kid, as many kids do. There's a certain freedom to just being able to draw as a child and not have any inhibition. My late father was a pulmonary physician. He was the chief of pulmonary medicine at UPMC. And early in my career as a kid, he asked me to do some drawings for him for his medical talks. And so one time he said, well, maybe you could draw me. And he developed a process called lung lavage, where he would wash out people's lungs. So I consider this my first editorial cartoon. This is a cartoon of my dad, the lung washer. And my spelling was just as good back then as it is now. Too many H's. But the reason I call this my first editorial cartoon is because he created this thing called a lung lavage. And of course I have him hanging them out on the line, the lungs, you know. But he had a full head of hair, and I made him bald, so I was already critical of people in power. So, you know, this was, but I've always loved this, and he used to use this in his talks. And so when he would give medical talks, yeah, that's good, that's great, perfect. When he would do medical talks, he would show my cartoons. He said it was a way to keep people awake during his talk. So, you know, I just sort of added this in there, you know. But anyway, I'm going to use the same theory as my father, but sort of in reverse. And so I'm going to show you some lungs. This is an emphysema lung here. So this is something you can, you know, go home with after lunch. Have you eaten lunch yet? I hope so. Oh, okay. Good, good. Now you really want to eat lunch. Well, as I said, I got a very early start as an artist. Some say even in the womb. But here I am, and I also got an early start as someone who is being edited by people. This is on the Good Ship Lollipop. I was born in Philadelphia, so this is where this was. But thank you, Pennsylvania. Woo! But anyway, this is me drawing, and the clown looking over my shoulder. This is one of my early drawings, and I think it really showed a sense of, aside from the bad apostrophe there and the bad spelling, it did show this has a sense of comic timing early on. So here's the guy saying, look, turkeys and course, it wasn't turkeys. It was help. So, and I also had a sort of a fascination with creating stories, and it would always be about a guy, and it would be his job. Like, so this one was an excerpt from Jim the Skin Diver. I won't tell you how that one ends, but but Jim doesn't make it. Bob the Barber, Smithy the Caveman. I'm not sure why I named him Smithy. It sounds more like a blacksmith, but this one also doesn't end well for Smithy. And then I used to create my own monsters as a kid. And then, so now, how does it apply to now? Well, I'm still drawing monsters, but they usually have big labels on them, like deregulation. So one question I get a lot is, why didn't I go into medicine? My father's a physician. So I decided to come up with the top 10 reasons that I did not go into medicine. Number 10, my dad had frighteningly big shoes to fill. That's just a nice one about my dad. Number 9, my handwriting was too good. Why is your father crying? I got an A in penmanship. Number 8, there are too many big words. You've got some serious disease I can't pronounce, but don't worry, Dr. What's-His-Name, the whatchamacallit specialist, will be along shortly, and he can tell you what it is. Not very comforting. Number 7, on-call is not a concept that I embrace. Doesn't this thing have a snooze button? Number 6, there's too much to remember. Let me see, how does that song go? The thigh bone's connected to the knee bone. The knee bone's connected to... Number 5, malpractice insurance is too high. Notice anything unusual in the x-ray, doctor? No, I can't see since I lost my glasses last week. Number 4, I don't really like the fashion. These would be good for winter, but I'm really more of an autumn. Number 3, everyone's too darn serious. Just make the incision, doctor. What is that? What was that? Kilroy. That's right. Kilroy was here. Yeah, that was the gag there. See, some other people lived in the 1800s as well. She's not going to live that down. Number 2, I hate golf. This is the last time I let you pick the course. You're just sore because I bogeyed on the windmill. And the number 1 reason that I did not go into medicine, there are too many bodily fluids. Whose lemonade is this, and what happened to my urine sample? Again, enjoy your lunch later. The other question I get a lot is, where do you get your ideas? And so I came up with sort of a little primer on how do I come up with my ideas, and sort of some of the myths about creativity. This is probably the biggest way I come up with my ideas, but we won't talk about that. So sometimes people ask me, they say, where do you get your ideas? Like I walk down to the grocery store and pick them up. Well, there is no idea store, but if there was, it would look like IKEA, idea. It's a big world. Someone's got to furnish it with good ideas. Also, there are no elves that come in the middle of the night to give you ideas, although that would be really cool. Now, sometimes I do sort of fall asleep with there's some story in my head, and then I wake up and because my brain has had some rest, I can come up with something a little quicker, but there are no elves. The ideas don't fall from the sky. There's no magic button or switch, although caffeine does help. The creative process is often a waiting game for me. I read the stories, I take in the news on television or the internet, and then I sort of wait for that creative idea to sort of pop in there. It's almost like my brother took me hunting once, where we sat in a tree for hours waiting for these turkeys to come by, and they never did. But that's kind of what it's like. So here I am waiting for the idea to sort of take the bait, and then of course there's nothing prouder than a cartoonist who's got an idea. Quick, call the editor. My water broke. and bringing a new idea into the world. Nothing prouder than a cartoonist with a new cartoon idea. So I give birth to one every day, so 6 days a week. But sometimes it's not that much hard work because you just turn on the television and it just jumps right out at you. Here is an image of Netanyahu back when he gave his speech to the UN, and he decided to bring some audiovisual with him, and this is what he brought. And I couldn't help but look at the drawing, and of course I'm, someone who draws, so I immediately looked at it and thought, oh my God, that looks like, old-timey, maybe from the 1800s, those bombs they used to use, especially in the old Warner Brother cartoons. So immediately this one just came to me. Here's Ahmadinejad, and he's at the table there, and they're looking at it, and he's saying, okay, who leaked our nuclear bomb design to Netanyahu? And of course, there's Wile E. Coyote looking very guilty. So that one just sort of popped into my head as soon as I saw the image. Other times, you see a story like this is Dick Cheney refusing to call the CIA brutal interrogation techniques torture. And there was something called the torture report that had come out. And so I just drew this cartoon. Here he is with his torture handbook, and he's saying, bring us your huddled masses yearning to be waterboarded. So the way I do it is I read the papers. I start out by listing some topics. Now, this is an old notebook of mine. This says, from 2004, it says Groundhog Day, WMD intelligence, Janet Jackson's wardrobe malfunction. That tells you how long ago this was. And then gay marriage. And then so what I did was I took two of the topics here, the war in Iraq, and or the WMD intelligence and Groundhog Day, and I created, this is how the sketch looked in the sketchbook. And then I finish it with the cartoon, and this is the cartoon. It's Punxsutawney Phil dead on the ground, and George W. Bush is saying, I was wrong about him having weapons of mass destruction, but he was still a threat. And this is kind of how he justified the war, like, Saddam was still a threat, even though we got it all wrong. Once I have the idea, I still have to get it approved by the editor. So in the old days, I would go into the office every day and show him my sketches, and he would pick one, or if I only had one, he would say yes or no. And now it's been streamlined. I work at home in my studio, so I just email the idea to him in the morning, and then he sort of gives me the feedback. But trying to get a word person to understand what a visual drawing is going to look like is sometimes hard. So there's a lot of difference between the cartoonist brain versus the editor's brain. So this is what I'm up against every day. Here's the cartoonist brain. Probably the biggest thing on the cartoonist mind is toilet humor. I'm always trying to get something in there, but they never let me. Winning a Pulitzer, keeping his or her job, and that tiny, tiny little part of the cartoonist's brain, that is taste. Now we go to the editor's brain. Now I had a male editor at the time. This could be a woman. But not offending the readers, keeping the publisher happy, winning a Pulitzer, kissing up to advertisers, the bottom line, and then that tiny, tiny little part of the editor's brain, that is sense of humor. So you can see they're very, very different, and they don't always match up on the day that I'm trying to get something in the paper. This is John Allison. He is currently the editorial page editor. And he lives by the AP style book. So oftentimes, rather than saying, that is a hilarious cartoon, you're brilliant, you're a genius, he says, oh, according to the Associated Press, poophead is 2 words. He's always about the spelling and the punctuation, and he hardly ever reacts to the cartoon itself. No, he's great though. He's got his own sense of humor. But here I am sort of sitting at the drawing table looking at a story about cloning, and so they were cloning sheep, and so I think, okay, so a bunch of sheep that look alike, that doesn't really scare me that much, but what would scare me about cloning is something else. And so what would scare me? Well, this would scare me. A bunch of John Allisons running around. But anyway, people don't know my editor, so I have to figure out a way to put that into a national cartoon. So this was back in the 90s when Clinton was having his annual Easter egg hunt, And he says, I never should have approved funding for those cloning experiments, and you have all these little Newt Gingriches running around. You remember Newt, right? In fact, he came back, he keeps coming back, you know, and he came back in 2012, and he called out Mitt Romney. He actually said this. He said, hey, Mitt, can you drop the pious baloney? You know, he was criticizing him for being pious. And then I thought, well, he's the biggest wiener of them all, speaking of baloney. So, but Newt's been fun for me over the years. In fact, this is a throwback to 1994. This is my one Newsweek cover. Oh, I've had some Japanese Newsweek covers, several, but this is the one big magazine cover I had back in 1994. I did How the Gingrich Stole Christmas. I don't know if you remember that. It was funny because when I saw it on the newsstand, it was right next to Man of the Year, Pope John Paul, you know, for Time magazine, and then my Gingrich over here. It was very funny. But anyway, so I have to get it past the editor. And the editors at the paper, and including the publisher, they think of cartoons in two categories. Ones that get angry letters and cancellations and phone calls and emails, and ones that don't. So they would much rather I do ones that don't most of the time. But I don't like to do that because, you know. But here's some examples of things that don't anger people. Now, sometimes you'll have like one or two people that get angry about it, but I'm just talking in general, like there isn't this mass anger about certain issues. Like Pittsburgh topics is usually one of those things. E.T., why are we cycling way up here? Because Pittsburgh drivers don't know how to share the roads. Not everyone responded well to the news that Heinz had been sold. You can have my ketchup when you pry it from my cold, dead hands. This is actually my friend Joe Wose, who I caricatured here. He is a huge ketchup. He puts ketchup on everything, and it has to be Heinz, so I put him in the cartoon. Now, this cartoon is actually about something that wouldn't get people, the cartoon wouldn't anger people, but certainly the topic has angered many people, the Highmark UPMC fight. She says, is it too late to ask for a third opinion? And of course, my Brood on Grant strip, I have a lot of fun with that. It's a local comic that takes place in a fictitious diner on Grant Street, which is where all the, you know, you people can move up. I see people straining to see. You can move up. There's lots of empty seats up here. But this is my Brood on Grant strip, and this was a takeoff on Downton Abbey. So this is called Tonight on Downton Abbey. Scandalous breakups. The House of Romoff is splitting from the House of Highmark. Oh my. Unlikely heirs. We're to be ruled by a petulant boy. Yes, Lord Peduto. Hee, you said Peduto. Scenes from the kitchen. Yin's forgot the fries. Her ladyship always gets fries on her salad net. Gossip about royalty, i.e. the Steelers. Lord Haley hasn't even spoken to Prince Ben. Shocking. And finally, nice try, but life here in the Burg will never resemble Masterpiece Theater. No tea and crumpets for you. Did you hear about the Marcellus Shale Festival they had here last week? Yes. The whole idea of marketing fracking as a festival makes me uncomfortable. What's next, the Carbon Monoxide Expo or the Mercury Poisoning Regatta? Or commemorative celebrations like the Love Canal Carnival, Tunnel of Love Canal. I knew our love was toxic. Or 3 Mile Island Jamboree. Yee-haw! Is it... I know, just drawing a leg coming out of the guy's head is funny, you know, or a foot. Is it fair to compare, I know that guy actually. Is it fair to compare fracking to a nuclear meltdown? No, fracking is far more ubiquitous. But anyway, so other topics that don't really get, that people pretty much agree on. We need better education, right? So that's an easy one. Do you think math and science are more important than English and literature? 7 of one, half dozen of another. This is back in the 80s. My style has changed a little bit, but your grade in history is a national embarrassment. Chill out, Dad. You're acting like it's the Canadian Missile Crisis or something. We've all seen these students, right? This is the Kansas Board of Education. All in favor of banning evolution from our curriculum, say ugh. Here's a recent graduate saying, "I can't wait to start working in my chosen field." Neither can I. Healthcare. So healthcare has become, both a thing that angers people and something that we can all talk about in general without getting too angry. Here's some old cartoons about it. Here's a patient saying, "I'm worried that healthcare has become too impersonal, doc." "Nonsense, just relax and lie back on the barcode scanner." "The USDA is giving its food pyramid a makeover. What's wrong with the one we have now?" The bucket-o chicken jumbo fries pyramid. It looks and feels like real fat, but it's just that new fat substitute. I don't think she's buying it. Here's one in a bakery, and the headline on the newspaper says, "Obesity is the #1 killer." And the guy says, "Sorry, pal, there's a 5-day waiting period on that cupcake. Guess I'll have to resort to the bake sale loophole." And you guys remember Joe Camel. Here's R.J. Nabisco saying, "Due to criticism, we've decided to replace Joe Camel with characters that appeal to a different age group. Beanie Babies smoke camels." This is back when, in the 90s when Beanie Babies were big. And speaking of smoking, I think you'll enjoy this one. This is chronic bronchitis. For those of you who've missed the earlier slides, you won't understand this, but again, it looks like something you can think about during lunch. The economy, another topic. This is just the falling dollar, just a straight image with it, no caption. Here's a more wordier one. "Job outsource, no health care, up to my ears in credit card debt. Look on the bright side, no one will want to steal your identity." Good advice. Let's see. The good news is we've discovered life on Mars. The bad news is they're willing to work for 1/10 of your salary. Here's a little girl on Santa's lap, and she says, "Skip the lead-tainted toys from China and just leave me cash, preferably in euros." And we've all heard the phrase, "a rising tide lifts all boats." Well, this guy's got different ideas. He says, "Economists changed the expression to a rising tide lifts all yachts." This is the 99%. The environment is another topic. Now, this does stray into an area that does anger people because some people, those who believe that global warming is a hoax and all of that, they do sometimes get angry by these cartoons. But generally, people sort of agree with them. This is back in the 80s when there was all of those oil spills. And this woman is saying, "Could you rub some oil on me, dear? Just wait, the tide's almost in." The Exxon Valdez, you remember that. "What, me worry?" Here's one about pesticides. "The evil queen? No, pesticides." And this is nice when you can use an image like this that everybody recognizes. And I think, did I write? Oh, no, I didn't put apologies to Disney. Usually I write something like that on there. BP saying, this is when they had the big oil spill. They're saying, "Do you have any experience with toxic leaks that continue to spew harsh contaminants?" "Yes, I was Mel Gibson's agent." Here's a guy with global warming is a hoax, and the guy says, "It's not the heat, it's the stupidity." Oh. Here's a fracking guy saying, "See, Marcellus shale drilling is a safe way to provide you with natural gas for your grill. It's a water fountain." But of course, in this culture, we all love our cars and we love, driving. "A truly American pledge. I pledge allegiance to fossil fuel for the SUVs of America and to the engine in which it burns, one nation, under gas, combustible with carbon monoxide for all." He's not kneeling either. He's standing for that. Now here's pop culture is another topic that I like to get into from time to time. This is an old one, so bear with me. But this is what the world cares about: save Africa from AIDS and famine. What America cares about: save Katie Holmes from Tom Cruise. This is back when he was jumping on Oprah's couch that I did that one. "Dad, is it the entertainment industry's fault that I'm exposed to this?" That's nice, son. This was a Michael Vick cartoon back when he was arrested for dog fighting, and it's if dogs ran the NFL, his passing numbers were down. It had to be done. because, you know, when the dogs are done fighting, they put them down. This one's very old, too. It's from the 90s. This is when Michael Jackson married Lisa Marie Presley. The good news is I located Elvis. The bad news is I told him about his daughter. Then he dies. More recent one. I'm a revolutionary martyr, and I vow to fight on. Wow, Charlie Sheen really needs help. Will there ever be a day when we can coexist peacefully? No, you'll always be a Mac guy, and I'll always be a Windows guy. I marched in the 1989 Tiananmen Square protest. What are you in for? I Googled the 1989 Tiananmen Square protest. All right, so those are some cartoons that don't anger people. Now let's talk about cartoons that do anger people. So I get a lot of letters and emails and phone calls. Not as many letters as I used to because people have switched over to electronic media. But one of the things I did recently, well, when I put out my book, and by the way, I'll have some books for sale. I have two books. One's my local mayoral ink book, and the other one is a national book that I did a few years back with, you know, sort of my 25th anniversary, with covering many years. But this is in the book. This is a page from the book, and it sort of lays out what kinds of different readers like to yell at me. And so I've named them different names. So the spoilers are the people that write eloquently, even though they disagree with me, they eloquently write something like, this person is arguing that, you know, saying that Roman Catholics need a more modern approach is not right, and liberal Catholics are self-centered individuals, and they make a fairly cogent argument, and they ruin it by saying, you know, Rob Rogers he's a low-life asshole, and I'm sick of him. You know, they just kind of spoil it at the end of the letter. So those are spoilers. The novelists are the people that write these really long ones and there's actually footnotes. I mean, serious. This is actually comparing some cartoon I drew to Nazi Germany. But and then there's the staters. I call them that because they usually are sending these letters from state institutions, either insane asylums or prisons. And they often look like this. So one guy used to just cut out the cartoons of pigs and put them on there. And then I once received this from somebody. I think it's an old bar of TWA soap. So it was clearly when you could still get soap on the plane. And then taggers, this is the last category. These are people who just cut out the cartoon and write whatever they want on it. So this person, he changed my caption to smart aleck cartoonists, you know. And then here's a person who decided to grade me like a teacher. And first they write crap on it, and then they said grade D-. So I still passed, you know, even with crap. This is great. But you know you're having a bad day when you get a letter, you open it up, and somebody has taken one of your cartoons and smeared it in poop. But you know it's not as bad as it could be when you look closer and you see that there's a blade of grass on the poop. So you know that either this guy's dumping in his yard or his dog did it, you know. So at least it's not quite as bad. But yeah, I've gotten a couple poop letters. And this is the cartoon he was complaining about. It's not even that dramatic. It was when Obama was sort of championing gay rights and same-sex marriage. And so this is the cartoon, and I don't think it's even that bad, really. So, but he got upset with it. Healthcare. So I had healthcare in the original, not angering people, but it also is now something that is beginning to anger people. Obama is a Nazi socialist who wants to unplug grandma. You're in luck. Crazy talk is not considered a pre-existing condition. And here's a very recent one. You'll notice that the black and white has switched to color. So I've been working in color for about 7 years now. So all the time. I mean, I used to do spot color in the paper, but trust me, I've done this before. This is the repeal and replace. So war is another thing that gets people upset. This is an early cartoon from '91. Peace on earth, buy arms here. I always felt like it was such a dichotomy that we were always sort of spreading the word of democracy and peace, but yet we were selling all these governments and these factions arms. Here's George W. Bush right before Iraq War, and he's saying, "You no longer have to live under the iron-fisted regime of the evil Saddam. We're here to liberate you." And of course, it was all about the oil. The U.S. just transferred sovereignty to our interim government, but all I got was this lousy T-shirt. This one is about Iraq. Good news, it looks like Iraq will not be another Vietnam, but Afghanistan, on the other hand, is definitely going longer than Vietnam. So here's one about the Afghan prison escape. 475 Taliban prisoners tunneled their way out. At least someone has an exit strategy. And here, you know, this I try to do when I can. Like, I decided to just make one of the soldiers a woman for no reason other than we have women in the military now, and it seems like the right thing to do. This cartoon was at the Hiroshima 60th anniversary, and I just drew what you see there on the television. And so here's a kid who's probably like 5. So this was in 2005. So he's just a kid. So he says, which terrorist group did that? Because he's not, you know, he's post 9/11, so he doesn't know anything different, you know. But anyway, I got a lot of flack on this. The palpable stupidity of Rogers likening Hiroshima to today's terrorism should be an embarrassment to any thinking person. And then I like at the end here, let's see. Oh, passes for provocative thought on the editorial pages. If there is a more primitive mind than Mr. Rogers published in a leading newspaper, I'd be amazed. I'd be amazed too. Nothing suspicious, just some Americans celebrating their independence. Wait, I don't like that guy, the guy burning his bratwurst. So this is the NSA spying on us. And of course, if we do get into war, the next war is going to be this one. He has his father's eyes. Now, they've figured out why he is so crazy. He's not getting enough oxygen to the brain. So his congestion, you can see there, is emphysema, I think. Another topic that really gets problematic is race. We deserve reparations for slavery, and this guy says, "Hey, we just gave you people 2 Oscars. Isn't that enough?" This is right after Denzel and Halle Berry won Oscars. This next cartoon did get me into some trouble. I like to look up the flagpole and see a symbol of our Southern heritage hanging there. What's so wrong about that? Now you can imagine this, you know, got some response, but actually, the African American community here in Pittsburgh did not yell about this, but it got published in an Oklahoma Christian University newspaper. And one of the students decided to protest it and called all the black churches and all the news stations and said that this was a racist cartoon because I showed a lynching. Not because she disagreed with what the cartoon was saying, but they fired the editor and it was a mess. But so sometimes they can have unintended consequences. Like, for instance, this one was intended to make racists uncomfortable, or people who think the Confederate flag is just a Southern symbol. And so you never know. You never know what's going to happen. What's wrong? I brought a photo ID. Do you have one where you don't look so much like a Democrat? So the whole voter ID thing, I think, is steeped in racism. And equal rights is another topic that has been in the news a lot lately. Here's some GOP senators saying, "Are bigots allowed to serve openly in the Senate? Don't ask, don't tell." This is an old one from 2004 election, and there's Tom Ridge saying, the latest alert, and he's saying, "Our intelligence tells us that Al-Qaeda is planning to launch several gay weddings during the U.S. election." They called Bill Clinton the first black president, which was kind of interesting. And then, so why not call Obama the first gay president? I think that's fitting. I brought you to the office today, honey, to show you what you could look forward to if you were a man. This is Take Your Daughter to Work Day. She seems to like the realistically proportioned Barbie we got her. Barbie, this is Dr. Ken. He'll be handling your breast implants, liposuction, and buttocks tucks. The president is attacking our beliefs on contraception. That reminds me, I'm almost out of birth control pills. Remember to pick up more condoms. Where is my diaphragm? Did I take my pill today? That one got a little bit of heat, as you can imagine, from Catholics in the city. This is a very Catholic city. And, you know, I was raised Catholic, so I understand, but I also think that, you know, when it becomes political about, you know, infringing on your freedoms, then I think it becomes politics. In my opinion, gender pay discrimination is immoral. Unfortunately, your opinion is only worth 77 cents on the dollar. Yeah, some of these are not as funny as they are just harsh, but true. Glorks will probe you now. You have Republicans on your planet too? This is back when, remember that guy, I can't remember who it was, Akins or somebody was saying they should do vaginal probes on women that want to, guns, obviously a very timely topic. The tragic shooting at Virginia Tech makes me want to hug my loved ones and tell them it'll be okay. They're there. And NRA saying, you can have my congressman when you pry him from my cold dead fingers. And this one is after Newtown, the NRA's solution to massacred school children. Can I have one, Mom? Can I? They actually they said they should arm the kids. That's ridiculous. This was after the Charleston shooting in the church Bible study. So here's USA Guns, great for all occasions. You've got couples therapy, back to school, movie night, take your gun to work day, military base visit, and Bible study. Religion, obviously one that gets me into a lot of trouble. This is one that didn't really get me into trouble, but this is how I've used it in some cases. This is the 2004 election with Bush again. Hope they can keep religion out of the presidential race. Too late. I don't think this is what the environmental Christians had in mind when they asked, what would Jesus drive? Do you remember that campaign? There was sort of environmental Christians asking, what would Jesus drive? And here's Jesus on TV saying, I'm a Ford truck man, that's all I drive. So this is how the cartoon appeared in the paper, but the original drawing, if you look closely at the TV, there's what I took out. See the cross in the back of the truck? Because, you know, if he was carrying his lumber, he would carry it in the back of his pickup truck, right? So, they thought that went too far. Like everything else, they were fine with. But here's when the Pope visited with Castro. You're an aging leader of a beleaguered belief system who tolerates no dissent. What do you want from me? Pointers? That got some letters. Here's one that did not make it into the paper. This is the rough sketch, so you're getting to see the raw material here. This is back when they were still hunting for Osama bin Laden, and there was also another one of these big pedophile scandals happening. And the guy, this is Osama bin Laden, and he says, I heard this was a good place for evildoers to hide. I thought that was a good cartoon. I'm not sure why they... well, whatever. I guess I know why, but this was Benedict, and he was giving his Easter speeches, but he was completely ignoring the pedophile scandal, so I drew this cartoon. It's the annual hiding of the pedophile priests, and he's got the little eggs with the priests' faces on them. So this one actually got approved, and then I sent it out for syndication like I do every day. And then around 7 o'clock, the publisher decided, no, we're not going to run this. So he killed it, but it was too late. It had sort of gone out there, and we have an agreement that that's okay. But then a week later, so that would have been Good Friday, then this would have ran. So that, I can kind of understand. But a week later, it ran in USA Today, the top cartoon, and so I was happy. I felt vindicated. Now this is when Benedict was leaving office, and this shows you kind of what I'm up against sometimes with the publisher. Publisher had been getting calls from the bishop telling him, you know, I draw, you know, Benedict's eyes too dark, and you know, make him look like, you know, like a monster or something. So, so anyway, when he decided to retire. Never been done, never happened before. So I draw this cartoon. My publisher's out of the country, so he's corresponding with email to the editors and saying, you know, let me know what Rogers is doing. I don't want to, you know. So there was this back and forth all day long. this is the first idea. Benedict, packing up his box like he's leaving the office, like he's got, he's lost his job. And he's saying, and so on his desk, I imagine things like how to hide a pedophile, the pill stops here, the devil made you gay. And he's saying, keeping the church in the dark ages is a job for a much younger man, And he did say that, being the Pope would be a job for a younger man. They killed that one. He said, no. And so then I drew this one, which is much softer, but he's on his front porch like an old guy, and he's saying, this is the Pope retires, and, no gays, contraception-free zone. And he's saying, hey, you progressive Catholics, stay off my lawn. I just thought that was funny. No. He's like, And so, and what I ended up with that day, I had to, so it was like 4 o'clock, and I had to come up with something. So I ended up drawing the one that you saw earlier of Kim Jong-un with the eyes, So I ended up coming up with a really pretty good cartoon in spite of losing most of the day. And I later got to do something on his retirement, but it was much less than these were, I thought. But doesn't mean I didn't get anything in on him. I did. Here's when they started their Twitter account at Pontifex. So he's tweeting and he's saying, OMG, this 21st century technology is great for spreading my 15th century views on gays, women, and contraception, LOL. And then my favorite part is hashtag say 10 Hail Marys. See, I grew up Catholic. I know. And then finally, let's get into some leaders here. I know we're getting late on time, but and then I think this will be it. So George W. Bush is somebody that I drew starting in 1999, and this sort of shows you the caricature process. When I first draw somebody that I haven't drawn for a while, it doesn't always look like it ends up looking, maybe months or years later. They evolve over time. So this is the evolution of the ears. So as George W. Bush became more radical in his beliefs and sort of his policies, his ears got bigger, and his eyes got sort of tinier and closer together, and he looked more simian to me, as I drew him. So these are actual heads that I took off of other cartoons and put them on the bodies. But this is from 1999, July, and then November. November, he gets a little goofier looking. And then here he is in May of 2000. And then here he is in January of 2001. And then this is pretty much how I drew him the rest of the time. That's how he looked. Obviously, his body was different. But here's Nixon and Watergate. Mistakes were made. Reagan with Iran-Contra. Mistakes were made. George Bush with Iraq, mission accomplished. But of course, we know who the real president was. And here's Dick Cheney, and I was watching the Winter Olympics, and I saw this, and I thought I got to draw this cartoon. So coming up next, Olympic snowboarding, and so here's what he's thinking. Frozen waterboarding, get it? Yeah. But of course, I drew cartoons about Obama too, but they weren't as frequent because his policies didn't offend me as much. But that's what people don't understand. They're writing to me saying, why aren't you doing equal stuff on the Democrats? And I'm saying, because that's not my job. My job is to draw something that gets me riled up, that makes me angry. And the Republicans are the ones making me angry right now. But this is right after the midterm shellacking in 2010, and Obama is saying, I had a hard time communicating my message. What did he say? He said he's a hardline communist messiah. This is just to show that I did do some on Obama. If Dr. King were alive today, wonder what he'd say. Quit compromising your damn principles. I think he worked too hard to try to please the Republicans who weren't going to move anyway, so... I mean, good on him for trying, but at some point he should have just said, okay, I'm done, and moved on. This is after bin Laden was captured, was killed, and he's saying, he's not only merely dead, he's really most sincerely dead. But of course, there's a birther in the foreground there, and he's saying, I'm going to need to see a death certificate, because he's not going to believe it. The debate over campaign finance reform continues. This is from 2001. Will the esteemed senator from the great state of Exxon please yield to the honorable senator from Philip Morris, who'd like to rebut earlier arguments made by the good senators from Microsoft and the NRA? This cartoon is 16 years old, but it could have been drawn today, yeah. Here's a more recent one. Civil War reenactment? No, congressional budget battle. Here's Congress on the swing set. Wee, wee, wee. Enough work, time for recess. It always shocks me that they got nothing done and then they go on recess. I don't really understand it. Here's one about the GOP and their immigration policies. Give us a hug. This is when they're trying to say that they're trying to include the immigrants, you know, to be nice to immigrants, and I don't believe it. Now here's a voter ID law that makes sense. Here's a Tea Party guy, and he's also a birther. There, you know, so he's got the double whammy. And she says, "Sorry, I can't let you vote until I see some proof of sanity." Government is evil. We'd be better off without it. Little help? Now, sometimes our leaders are just crazy people, and here's Pat Robertson. He's not our leader, but some people follow him, and this is something he actually said. Earthquakes are God's way of telling sinners the end is near. And here's Michelle Bachmann. She actually said this. Hurricanes are God's ways of telling politicians to cut spending. And then here's God saying, idiots are my way of telling people I have a sense of humor. All right, finally, we're down to the good stuff, and this is. I can get through this, and we'll still have time for questions, so that's good. So, last year we had a great, a crazy campaign. I mean, and we did an exhibit at the Toonseum. I don't know if anybody's been there, but thank you. And it was all about campaign cartoons. So, as a side thing, I drew this cartoon to kind of explain what it takes to create a 2016 campaign cartoon. Let me draw you a picture. Step 1, find a topic that begs for satire. GOP candidates compare penis size. Hello. Step 2, choose the perfect metaphor. I can't draw genitals in a family newspaper, but hands are okay. Things with small hands, a baby, a watch, a T-Rex. Step 3, create a rough sketch using your favorite sketching tool. I don't really sketch with a fork, but I thought it would be funny. It's just. So this is an actual sketch from my sketchbook. I wrote Trumpzilla in there, though. It didn't actually, and I wrote the bubble. It didn't actually say that. Some cartoonists sketch with a pen. Some use a pencil. This one I created for this particular thing. And some use a tablet. Hopefully they use a tablet that's more recent than Etch-a-Sketch, but you know. Step 4, transfer the sketch using a light table or some other black magic. I still draw with ink on paper, which is, people are doing less and less now. A lot of them draw directly into the computer, which that means you don't end up with an original. But I still draw with a light table. I do a rough sketch first, put it on the light table, pencil it in on the better paper, and then I ink it in. Step 5, ink the cartoon using your inking tool of choice. Get it? Because octopuses have ink, Step 6, add color, either by hand or digitally. I do all my color now on the computer, so that part is digital. So my originals are only black and white. But, yeah, why isn't this working? And step 7, stand back and watch as readers react to your brilliance. I don't get it. Give it a sec. I still don't get it. Give it another sec. I don't have all day. So there you go. And that's sort of the step-by-step process. That's the black and white original in the middle there. The rough sketch on the left. I flipped it on the light table so that I could make him facing the other way. And then there's the final with the color, the digital color added. It does take a long time. I mean, it is a process. So here's some of the campaign cartoons, and then we'll get into Trump. But I don't know if you remember Ted Cruz when he jumped into the race. Most people throw their hat in the ring, Senator Cruz, and he's just throwing his whole self in there. And then, of course, we have the Bush legacy. Read my lips. I am my own man. Mission accomplished. So these are obviously things that all three of them said. But and I do draw Democrats from time to time. I do. Bernie and Goliath. I'm here to take back our democracy from millionaires and billionaires. And Hillary says, how cute. This is when, we never dreamed that Hillary would not be president. Here she is, Game of Thrones 2016. This isn't a coronation. I want my minions to see me as a candidate of the people. Well, you could start by not calling them minions. And of course, I had to draw him in his boxers there. I like this one. This is the many faces of Bernie Sanders. The angry at Wall Street face, sad about prison system, disappointed with Obama, surprised by grassroots support, giddy over free college, ecstatic about New Hampshire. This cartoon ran right after he won New Hampshire. So, and he was giving his acceptance speech, and he was sort of with that same face, and I just thought, my God, he can't even be happy. That's his happy face. So that's what gave me the idea. And then, of course, as we watched, all the Republicans in the primary there, Trump certainly made fast work of them. So here you have Ground Carson, Lion Ted T-Bone, Jeb Baloney, Christie Prime Rib, Fiorina Flank, and Rubio Ribeye, and he's saying, "Let the healing begin." Trump steaks, bigotry beef. Trump wine, white power, misogyny. Trump water, xenophobic springs. And Trump snake oil, Trump University elixir, only $35,000. Now, this next cartoon, this was right after the convention. I got to cover the conventions, and so right after the convention when he made his final speech, and it was so angry. His speech was all about doom and gloom, so I thought I'd compare him to other speeches from Republicans. Shining City on the Hill, 1,000 Points of Light, Compassionate Conservatism, and Death, Mayhem, Destruction, Only I Can Save You. What has Trump ever sacrificed? Losing a reality show was my Iraq War. This is the 2016 Trump Olympics. Leadership high jump. He went under. We'll have to lower the bar again. Name-calling marathon. Crooked Hillary, Hillary Rotten Clinton, the devil, creator of ISIS. Foreign policy diving. Cannonball. And finally, the civility shot put. You won't believe how far I can toss this crying baby. Hillary for Gulag. Why would he embrace such a polarizing narcissistic bully? You mean Putin or Trump? Hard to tell. Which outfit is more disturbing, the burkini or the Trumpkini? This is his Muslim ban. After the third debate, actually, people were, the low expectations for Trump were so low that people were surprised that he didn't, stumble too bad. Hillary didn't end war or cure cancer. She clearly lost. Trump didn't grope her on stage. He won. What kind of locker room is Trump hanging out in? I just kind of imagined, all the names on the locker. But then, of course, it didn't matter to anybody. Trump won the election, and he gets to hold up the fake news newspaper that sort of the old Chicago Tribune, Dewey defeats Truman. I promise to be a president for all Americans. That includes scary Muslims I want to ban, dirty illegals I want to deport, blacks who are killing each other with nothing to lose, veterans dumb enough to be captured, whiny disabled losers, idiots who think global warming is real, nasty women, flat-chested women, women who aren't tens, women I've bragged about assaulting. This could take a while. Okay, so here's an actual Trump cartoon that got killed. So those of you who've been reading the Post-Gazette lately know that my publisher has a fondness for Trump. So I have been having some issues with getting some things in, but he's also very much understanding about the fact that I need to express my own opinion. So I get a lot in. This one did not get in. This was right after the election. It was, I think it was Black Friday or something, and so I drew this. Holiday shopping in Trump's America. White Nationalist Friday, sheets and things, white sale. Small-minded Saturday, hetero barn, we do not don gay apparel. And Cyber Bully Monday, don't buy crooked media's lies about conflict of interest. Buy Trump products. But he thought it was too much, so he killed that one. The swearing in, holy beep, this is really happening. And then, of course, the passing of the torch. His first press conference, he actually said, you know, I'm kicking out some of you news organizations because of fake news. No more peddlers of fake news at my press conferences. And meanwhile, this guy's the biggest fake news guy in the world. This is not, when Flynn resigned, this is not about the Russians, it's about the leaks. Giddy up, comrade. I just like showing him writing, you know, without his shirt on. Russian chess pieces, king, queen, bishop, knight, rook, pawn. Here's one without a lot of words. He's sitting on a branch labeled credibility, and we see what's happening. Here's a Steve Bannon cartoon when he was getting angry when they were feuding. He said, hey, you're supposed to dance with the white nationalist who brought you. Just ignore him, Jared. And then when people were, when he fired Comey, people were comparing it to Watergate. So here's Nixon saying, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And you would be... I really don't think he knows who Nixon is. See, I told you I'd build a wall. Obstruction of justice. This is the biggest witch hunt in history. Surrender Comey. Why can't they leave me alone? Blessed are the meek. Agree to disagree. He did meet with the Pope, and that's pretty much how it went. This is when he made that comment about Paris. He said, I represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris. 1940s Pittsburgh, that is. Not the 1800s. 1940s. At real Donald Trump. Donald J. Trump, let Obamacare implode. This is El Nino, the climate report, him dissing the climate report. Here's another cartoon that actually didn't make it into the paper, but since I'm able to syndicate them on Facebook, some of you may have seen it. It's only been 6 months, give him a chance, and of course, you know, there's that. My publisher's reasoning for this was just that he felt that, you know, that with the back and forth between Kim Jong-un and Trump, he felt that Kim Jong-un was in the wrong, but not Trump. Trump condemns the many sides of hatred and bigotry. There are two sides to every lynching. Put yourself in my jackboots. It cuts both ways. And because he defended the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists, I drew this cartoon. Another one that it kind of almost didn't get in, but it did. So, because he really wasn't defending the people that were protesting. Here's a GOP support for Trump, no matter what he says or does, and the guy says, I can't believe this one is still standing. When the flooding happened, I guess it was Harvey, or Irma, no, Harvey, in Texas, while people were getting flooded, Trump was pardoning Sheriff Arpaio, so I did this cartoon. No words, just simple. Scientists say rebuilding in the wake of the storm is foolish, naive, and dangerous. What do they know? And this is the guy obviously is going to rebuild the Climate Change Deniers Association. This one was a recent one about the national anthem at the football games. I did not risk my life and limb for my country, so some spoiled millionaire could disrespect our flag by viciously attacking the free speech of athletes. So I kind of flipped it on its head there. This one got a lot of reshares on social media. I think a lot of people liked it. Disaster relief in Houston, food, water, and clothing. Disaster relief in Washington. They're bringing in the empathy. So this is what bipartisanship looks like? Pretty much. This is after Trump met with the Democrats because he was tired of dealing with the Republicans. So that now, and they're both like, yeah, not my president. And finally, this is where we are. today. You're an unhinged, childish nuclear despot with insane hair. I know you are, but what am I? I'll leave it on that one. Yeah. Obviously, Trump has been both a boon for cartoonists, but obviously, it's not like GM. What's good for, what was GM's slogan? What's good for GM is good for the country. Well, what's good for me is not good for the country. But I don't think he's a Republican or a Democrat, so I don't really think this is I do have issues with the Republicans, as you've seen, but my obsession with Trump is more just about how he's behaving. But we have time for questions before I go to sign some books. So any questions about process or anything? Anything you want to ask? Yes? Yes, that has happened. I've had ideas sketched out thank you, sketched out in my sketchbook, and then, yeah, the next day I see it online somewhere and somebody else has drawn it. And it happens a lot. I mean, cartoonists are working with the same pool. That's why you see sometimes the comedians at night, they kind of cover the same material. And sometimes, they tell the same joke. But when you're doing a visual image and, it is really hard not to hit on the same thing. But yeah, that has happened. The one time that it happened that is an interesting story, I don't know if you guys remember this, but back after 9/11, cartoonists all across the country all what do you say about a terrorist attack on New York City? The image that comes to mind is the Statue of Liberty because she stands for liberty and freedom. And these people are trying to take that away from us, but it's still standing, right? Oh, you've got your Statue of Liberty T-shirt on, I see. So, but all, like 100 cartoonists around the country all drew the same image, the Statue of Liberty still standing. Either crying, weeping Statue of Liberty, or the torch coming out of the smoke. And I had an image of the Statue of Liberty crying in my sketchbook. But that was back in 2001 when we had 2 cartoonists at the paper, and we switched off days. So on the alternate day, I was working on my local cartoon, and he was drawing that day, Tim Manise. And Tim Manise drew the Statue of Liberty weeping. So I had to immediately scratch that off, but I was so happy that he had done that because then everyone in the country did it. And I was able to say, no, I didn't draw that one. So I was one of, maybe a handful of people that didn't draw that idea, but I had to come up with something else. But that's a case in point where it does happen, and sometimes it happens even, farther wide than you would think. But yes, it does. And as soon as anytime I see it or I hear about it, if someone has seen it somewhere, then I don't draw it. I usually think, okay, well, if that's been done, then I should come up with something new, even if I thought of it without knowing that they had done it. Questions? Another question? Yes.
Is any of your subject responded to you, like any of these politicians responded to you, or have you ever met them and they responded to something you've done on them?
Donald Rumsfeld, I've done many cartoons about him. He's a collector, so he would call people up. He would write letters and say, please send me the original. So I sent him a couple of originals. The best story is, this is really going to date me now, but Michelle Madoff, who used to be on the city council, was a very flamboyant, crazy kind of character who liked to be loud and scream at people. And she went on the radio. She got a new radio show, and I did this, and she said, and they were introducing her, and they say, well, describe yourself. And she says, I look like a young Barbara Stanwyck, and you should see me in a bikini. I look great. And it was just so weird. It was like just such an odd thing to say on the radio. So I drew her standing in front of the microphone with, like flashing, with a bikini on and like little skinny legs and looking crazy and saying, I look like a young Barbara Stanwyck. And I thought, okay, she's the kind of person that would react really strongly and yell, She loved it. She said, I'm sorry you couldn't have drawn this from person, like, and she sent me an airbrushed headshot signed. And then she asked for the original. So you never know who's gonna like and who's gonna hate. I mean, I did hear from somebody, one of the off-duty police officers who regularly followed the mayor, Luke Ravenstall, around, said to a friend of mine when he saw one of my cartoons up on an exhibit of Boy Mayor drawing him with the little juice box and everything, and somebody said, you know, he acts real nice and everything, but he hates those. So he's always nice. Luke was always nice to me whenever I saw him on the street, but apparently he didn't like being depicted as a 6-year-old boy. So I could see that. But that's about it. Most politicians know that it's best to just like not comment. Trump is not that way. It gets under his skin. But usually he doesn't comment on cartoons as much as he does on like Saturday Night Live and other things. Yeah. What? Yeah, that's right. You're right. He doesn't read. He doesn't read. He only watches television. Yes. Yes. Well, that's a very good question, because I described this to somebody. I said, you know, people come up to me and say, oh, you must be loving this. You must be loving it. And there's a part of me that does enjoy, you know, some of the craziness of it, because it makes it more interesting than just like trying to comment on policy that's kind of dry and everything. But I explained to them, it's like trying to catch a thimble of water out of a fire hydrant, you know, that's been opened. It's impossible. And the thing about choosing one topic over another is you have to be careful that the next day he's not going to say something that would totally go back, because he flips around. He changes his mind and says different things. So you can be out of date within 24 hours on a cartoon. So you have to be careful. But it's tough. It's tough. It's very hard. I don't know how I pick and choose. I just kind of, sometimes it's just, well, do I have an image for that one? No, not really. Do I have an image for this one? Yeah. So sometimes it's just about coming up with, well, what would I draw? He's hard to exaggerate because he's so exaggerated. So to make satire out of somebody who's so already satired is almost impossible. So I usually, it comes down to, well, is this one that I can take another step further and exaggerate even more? So I'm not Sarah Huckabee. I don't know. I'm not going to give you a follow-up question. No, I'm just kidding. Sean Spicer, you know. Go ahead. I do spend a lot more time than people realize. I usually try to do the reading in the morning and come up with something by lunch, and then I spend the rest of the day executing it. But yes, I spend a lot of time sort of absorbing. Like I said, the day of the Netanyahu thing, I just flipped on the TV with my coffee in the morning and saw a recap of that, and I thought, oh, I've got my idea, you know. So, but yeah, it does take up time to kind of do the research and try to come up with something, you know, especially on days when I'm not drawing Trump, where I have to really kind of find something else, because, you know, he takes up all the oxygen in the room. So if I try to space them out as much as I can, you know. Yes. So it takes different forms. The first time I did it, I've covered actually like 5 elections, and what I do is I don't cover the campaign trail itself. I cover the convention. So I go to the convention. I just write about the things. Sometimes one year I did a blog, and I had sketches in the blog, and it was just online. And then they would run a sketch and a little excerpt in the paper. And then one year I did videos where I would speed up the drawing of the sketch at the end and show that. This last year, I got a freelance gig with a place called the Nib, where I did a 6-panel sort of sum up of each day of the convention, and that was a lot of work, but it was fun. So what I'll do is I'll go to the events, I'll go to some of the protests, I'll cover the protests, and I'll figure out a way to draw about it in a cartoon. And sometimes it's sort of in a storytelling format. I was trying to think if I had any of those. I don't think I have any of those here with me, but well, let me see. I might. Let me just look. But anyway, another question while I'm looking for that.